somebody will make a claim about how like a professor or a certain person, they did something racist. And I'm like, okay, well,
Yeah.
what did they do? And then you go and you'll read like the particular story, and if there are no quotes, you have to start making a lot of assumptions. Like, well, it seems like what they did wasn't necessarily that bad, but like I could conceive of a world where the professor is like really compassionate and just said something like maybe a little bit too challenging for the students and it was taken the wrong way, or
Yeah.
another world where the professor is actually kind of a dick and it seems like he doesn't care
Yeah.
about or have compassion for these issues, and then he
Yep.
brought up a challenging statement, and so understandably people have that type of reaction.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Or they
but
tried
it's
to make a joke and it fell flat.
maybe, yeah. It's
Yeah.
it's just it's really hard to tell. It's hard to tell sometimes because I get worried that more and more things are shifting into this direction to where originally I might read something, I might read something where a professor does something that's racist, transphobic, or whatever, and it's like, okay, well, were they an asshole about it? Like, was it really that,
Yeah.
or was it that they were a jerk? But then I'm seeing more stories where it's like, this is getting harder to defend.
Hey, baby.
There was a
Yeah.
there was a New York Times story about. Do you know anything about Donald McNeil?
Yeah, I do. And I don't know the exact story, but I know
Okay,
that.
he did a trip to Peru that he'd done a few times with some college kids, and I guess he was in the habit of having like challenging conversations with the kids, and a couple topics came up for that, and I think he eventually like got fired from the New York Times and everything. And when I read through that story where there's a lot of information given, and I feel like I'm getting a decent perspective on it, I see stuff like that, I'm like, this seems kind of shitty. I don't think this guy should have been fired for that, or it's a little worrying that
Yeah.
like the entire institution turned against him for that. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like
Yeah.
some more of those seem to be popping up, and then I get a little bit worried because outside of that's in the academic world, that's a problem. Outside the academic
Well,
world, or go ahead, yeah.
no,
Before
well, it's no wonder that people are afraid to touch these issues,
mm-hmm,
right? I mean, look, for me, last summer when Fox News, Tucker did two pieces on me.
mm-hmm,
Uh, and then just the whole right wing. I mean, they just picked it up. They were looking for the poster child for critical race theory.
okay,
And they picked this clip out on me that was just like very nothing. And I mean, first off, they picked two clips out. Well, one was Andrew Sullivan did it. No, it was Distort Denusa, Dinesh D'Souza,
mm,
right? When he was at Dartmouth, his nickname was Distort Denusa.
yeah,
So he picked the first one up. I was critiquing this Coca-Cola. This is I mean, maybe you get this, right? But it was some kind of training that was happening at Coca-Cola, and somebody had put up kind of on a slide, white people need to be less oppressive and less ignorant and less stupid and less this and less that,
mm-hmm,
right? And I was just like, oh my God, that's terrible, right? So I took those words and I put them on a slide, and I asked some white people just about it, I'm like, hey, so this is from training that happened at Coca-Cola, and white people need to be less oppressive, less ignorant, less stupid, less this, less that, right?
Oh, I think
And
I
then
actually remember. I think I might have covered this on my stream, right? And they presented it as though you were telling your classroom this instead of.
yeah.
I think
Yeah,
I'm almost positive we went over this story. I didn't know that was you.
yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, just like that kind of thing. Like, oh my God, like, and this kind. But if they would have taken it, and see, the left does this too, right? The left does it, the right does it. If they would have taken this segment and showed the entire segment on Fox News or whatever conservative site it was, they'd have been able to say, whoa, this sociologist is making a really good point about the absurdity of some of this, like social justice, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, it would have been a perfect opinion piece for Fox News, right?
Yeah.
Well, so would my other piece have been, actually, if they would have taken the entire clip, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't do that.
Obama.
And so I can understand why people would start to get, very antsy talking about this. But what I've decided to do is put, and this is Jeff and I, but this was kind of when he
Smoogarino
so
on
we're
the
gonna put
Malzahar.
everything I ever do that we ever do in that room,
Tall
we're gonna
order.
put it out onto YouTube, so that nobody can ever say, like, you can always go back.
Dirty
and see the
rats.
Yeah.
original. And so that's really what.
Yeah,
That's
outplayed
the
and champ
only way
select.
around it.
Yeah,
But
I
there's
say
always
even at
something.
that sense, it doesn't always work. But that's something that I figured out recently. I've
The
got
zero
gone
game
full on to
allowing.
say that like I'm not going
Feeling
to defend
confident.
15-second clips of me because I don't make 15-second
See if
videos.
she
So
knows how to
whatever
block
you're
against me.
seeing, that's a 15-second video. That's not. I don't
Yeah.
endorse that message. You know, like you might
Yeah,
see
but
something
listen,
that
man.
seems like highly irresponsible. It probably is, but that it would be if I released it as a 30-second video. But that's not what I do. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so you just have to ignore it, and that's what I do. I ignore it. But here's the thing, right? So Penn State, they got hammered. Look, I was getting a hate email every 5 minutes. I mean, I had hundreds and hundreds. I had to stop checking my mail and answering my phone for about 3 weeks, right? But to its credit, my university, they watched the whole thing. They saw the clips. They people, they get complaints all the time, and my bosses watch my whole class, and they say, "Oh, that was actually pretty cool. That was great." But somebody's going to complain about something, eventually. But to their credit, from the president on down, I've been here a long time. I'm not outlandish. I'm very thoughtful. I'm very careful in the kinds of things that I say, and they know that I challenge people, and they really have my back. And they just said, no, not at all. We're not. No. And people were demanding that I get fired, and that wasn't even remotely on the table, because there's a trust. And so what happens with a lot of people who haven't built up that trust, that they don't get the backing of their institution or their company or whatever it is. But when you're somebody like me, it's got 30 years of building up the trust. It's like, okay, and I think that matters.
Yeah, I don't think I disagree with you. I was invited to there's a university in California called Pepperdine to talk to a bunch of high school students. They were like, it was like a youth seminar thing or whatever. And this audience, it must have been like, I want to say like, fuck, I don't remember 100%, but I want to say like 20 or 30% white. So very colorful audience, very different ethnic backgrounds, very strong social justice opinions. They were a highly active political group of young people in California. And and I was kind of worried because it's like if I'm invited to give speeches and things, like I want to challenge people. It's what I do on stream or whatever. And I was like very challenging of a lot of like I think there were certain BLM narratives or trans narratives that I was like putting forth challenges to. But I think if you listen to me speak, like it's pretty obvious that I'm always coming from a place of compassion for these people and like bettering society.
Yeah.
And I was expecting to get a lot more of like the militant pushback, but I didn't. All the kids there were super excited to talk to me. It was a super positive experience for me. I loved it. It was really fun. And people like write letters afterwards and they thank me for coming. I thought it was like really cute. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And it's really hard sometimes to figure out, just circling back on everything we've said, it's like, I wish I could see some of the confrontations that happen in class and then get the further background on it. Because it's so hard to tell if like the students are becoming activists and crazy, which to some extent I'm sure they are, or if like the professors are just huge fucking dicks, and like of course the students are always gonna have that type of interaction. I was lucky enough that for the kids that I was talking to, the person that went after me for speaking was Dennis Prager, who I'm sure you've heard of, and he kind of in a way went over similar topics. But I could see their response to him, but he was so much more aggressive in his rhetoric about it. Like, bringing up the idea that, like, there is no such thing as systemic racism. And a kid goes, well, why do you think, what about systemic injustice, like in the criminal justice system?
Yeah.
And he's like, black people are in jail more than white people because minorities commit more crime.
Yeah.
And it's like, that is true, but I feel like I could say the same thing without like the kids going crazy over it, because he's saying it in the most like provocative way possible. It's like, geez.
Well, the thing is, if you're gonna make that, he's gonna make an argument like that, and I'm like, hey, dude, that's actually not a very thoughtful argument.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's boring because it's not even like people committing crime isn't even the interesting question. The interesting question is why do they commit more crime? That's where you're actually getting into the thoughtful discussion, right?
Yeah, or it's. Yeah, it's just. Do you really want to? Do we want to get somewhere, or do we want to just
provoke people?
Just beat people up, provoke people.
Yeah.
And it's like, and he's now come in that world, like as a lot of these people have done. Like, so let's say somebody like me, I get canceled out, I lose my job, and then I become this darling of the right wing, and I just start attacking everything that is social justice.
No way! Get fucked!
Right? And like, there's a lot of money to be made. I mean, I could make
You gotta be joking me.
Quadruple my income easily
why I left
if I just yeah, if I just got myself fired and then you started going out on speaking tours, but like it's just not very smart. It's not very thoughtful, and I don't want that. And besides, like for me, I need to help the people who take a more of a social justice approach. I need to help them really firm up and sharpen their argument. And then the people on the right who are critiquing that, my job is to help them make better critiques of that. Like be really better at the way you come at it. And so I have to be able to make both arguments or all the arguments
so
in
close.
between. And I have to,
I'm
and
so
my job is just to
sad.
help people. If you're going to hold that position,
You're out
then
deep.
you
You're
let
out
me help you
CSing
hold
him.
the position,
Keep it up.
right? If you
Keep it
wanna
up,
make the
Smug,
argument
okay?
that we need to close
You're
down
winning
the
this.
borders
Get in his head.
in the South,
You're living in his walls, okay?
Okay. You can make
He's
that
out of
argument.
mana against a Malzahar.
I
He's
wouldn't make
fucked.
that argument.
Okay? Don't
Well,
let
I
him back.
might, but if you want to make it, here's the dumb way to make it, what I think, and here's a kind of a smart way to make it. So let me help you sharpen that up. And
Yeah, and that's
a
always
lot of
been.
folks-
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say that's
No,
that
go
just
ahead.
on that. Like that's always been kind of like my thing is that I've gotten frustrated that progressives are like dog shit at arguing for things these days.
Oh,
like
God.
it feels like
Yeah.
the reason why I got popular on the internet is because I kind of have like an internet bully background. So I can like
Yeah.
do the bravado and scream at people and shout at people, and I'm a very like I'm very like number and data driven. Like all of my arguments, like I'm never gonna sit here and try to convince you that like we should let immigrants into the country because it's the right thing to do. That's never the argument I'm gonna make. It's gonna be reasons of economy. It's gonna be reasons of like foreign politics. It's always gonna be from those grounds. And it was always shocking to me because early in my internet career for debating for like politics stuff, I'm like I don't know why liberals run from like these like fact-based arguments, because like when we're arguing about like climate change, when we're arguing about
Yeah.
like monetary policy, well, like we're arguing these things, like the conservatives don't have the data on any of these answers. The conservatives don't have
Yeah,
the facts,
yeah,
but
yeah.
somehow the conservatives became the party of like like your feelings or your
No
feelings don't care about my
fucking
facts. Your facts don't care
shot,
about feelings.
bro.
Like,
How does that
all of
happen?
your arguments are either like
Unironically, how does that
theologically
fucking
based or just
happen?
based on
Yeah.
like this is what my small
Yeah.
conservative community goes. How do we lose that? And yeah, so I fought like that early on, but then I feel like it's kind of gone back to that way where progressives are very scared to deal with any data-driven
Jesus,
answers
bro.
whatsoever. All of the arguments.
I just
become,
feel like I'm
this type
out
of,
fucking
like,
playing the
ethical
fuck out of this Alawi, but
orthodoxy,
somehow
like, these are the
she's
progressive
just able to
beliefs,
get
and
out
you
with like 2
question
fucking
any of them in any way, shape, or
HP
form
every
you're doing.
time.
And then the issue you run into is,
So
as you said,
fucking
you don't have that like
cringe.
inoculation effect. Like what happens when you step into the real world and somebody actually gives you a good argument for why, like, should we give unlimited gender affirming care to trans people? What about when they detransition? Oh shit, the only time I've ever heard detransitioning brought up is when people said that's a transphobic thing. And I've never even talked to a person like that in real life. It's like, well, now you're not equipped to actually answer these questions in real life. And what's worse, anybody that's standing by on the sidelines watching these arguments happens sees a conservative that's really eager to dive into studies and data and fact, and progressives that are just saying, if you don't believe me, you're evil. And it's like, well, fuck, now you've lost. You've lost the
Yeah.
arguments. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and so what I often see, or what I sometimes see, maybe often, is the liberals who they don't have the data, and then they stay in this kind of moralistic place, and because it's just easier, because they can't make the argument. And the most fascinating thing that happens is when a liberal who's sort of rooted in the moralistic and argumentation encounters someone who's conservative with really thoughtful, sharp, and smart perspectives that are driven by facts and ideas, right?
Yeah.
And like the person has nothing to say, and the opposite happens. The conservative is just like basing on who knows, their vision of God or the vision of something. I have no idea. Who encounters someone who's really sharp and very thoughtful, and they have nowhere to go. And so, I mean, maybe that's just kind of where we're doomed to have those kinds of experiences. It's
Yeah, we could be, but I
Yeah.
feel like there needs to be more like it just I think if you see the challenge and then you understand how to address the challenge, you're better equipped for it in the future. This is why like
Yeah.
people get mad at me, but like I think that the worst types of people, I say worst from my perspective, should be allowed to like give speeches on college campuses. Like if you think that Nazis talking on a college campus is scary, you should wait until they're on 4chan or on Twitter, and now you don't
can't
have
stop.
a professor to talk
Careful.
about the conversation afterwards. Now you don't have fellow people to reflect on anything they're saying. And it's so incredibly frustrating. Are you familiar with Matt Walsh and his recent documentary of like how to be a woman? or like what is a woman or
No.
whatever. It's basically it's a big his anti-trans documentary essentially. But it's so frustrating to see even academics sometimes that he'll interview that are unwilling to critically engage with his question. And like
Yeah.
you should be able
Well,
to
because even if I engage with the question and somebody sees that, I might be seen as supporting that, and then I might be called out as being homophobic or sexist or racist or something. So it's better if I don't even talk about it.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I can't get in trouble if I say nothing.
Exactly, which is,
But-
and that's the issue, right? Nothing ventured, nothing gained. I think, right? If you've got a
Well,
whole
yeah.
academic institution that's too scared to even like again toss their hat in the ring, the thing that progressives never seem to understand is if you're not willing to engage with that idea, they will.
Yo,
It's kind of
careful.
like the
Tops
comment
mean
talking
as
from
fuck.
the left is like, it's not my job to
I don't know if
educate
they're doing
you.
Rift or not.
Okay,
but-
that's great that you feel that way, but Jordan Peterson loves educating people. Ben Shapiro loves educating people. So if it's not your job to educate, there's going to be somebody in the right to step up and do it. So when you abdicate that position, you've essentially ceded all of that ground to your ideological adversaries. Why would you ever do that? It just seems so insane, you know?
Yeah, I guess one of the things that I'm particularly careful about, and one of the things that kind of keeps me, in the classroom, because it really does keep me, even though I do lots and lots of things outside the classroom. But, I watch that eventually people just start to go too far, right? I've been kind of watching Peterson the past year or so.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like, you get too, it's almost like you get too
So
popular
tired,
and you
dude.
start thinking that you're bigger, or somehow you
She's
can
literally
get
just a
away with
fucking blitz
saying
champ.
things.
That's all she does. Just
You know,
like, I'm
his-
gonna fucking W key at
His
you.
problem,
Go.
the swimsuit bottle thing or whatever. It's like,
Oh, the
dude,
Elliot Page stuff.
Yeah, you don't have to, just don't comment on that. Really, it doesn't matter. Right? What do you? It's just so many people. Shapiro, forget about Shapiro. Right? It's just their job. They make money off of being provocative, and like, I'm just like, there's no need for that. It's not going to get us anywhere. Now, mind you, I'm a professor, so like, my job is to work with people to mold minds and or help people mold their own minds, right? I mean, that's what I do. But my job is to confuse people. So, which is what I say all the time. I want every time you leave my classroom, I want you to be confused. Or any talk that I give, I want you to be confused, because that way you're going to have to go out and try to figure it out for yourself, right? But like, oh gosh, these people that they make money off of this is like it's a little bit troubling.
Yeah, you end up with like I mentioned this before. You kind of talked about this in the beginning, but for some reason I always mention there's two types of people that get really good at something. The first type of person gets really good at a particular thing, and then they look around and they say, "Wow, I know so much about this thing. I bet every other topic could be equally as complicated." And then you've got the other type of person who gets really good at something. They're like, if I got really good at this one thing, I bet I know everything about everything. I'm just going to go tell people what, And that latter category is where I put, not trying to provoke you, I don't know who you feel about, but I feel that way about like some people like Jordan Peterson, who I would say that like when he's talking about psychology, at least in the past, everything he's saying is like not even good, but even insightful sometimes. Like I think he had a lot of positive and valuable insight into psychology. I thought he was really good at getting those points across. Elon Musk has interesting things to say about stuff like limited to the realm that he's talking about, but that's another guy who gets like pretty good at like business related stuff, and all of a sudden he's like giving speeches on like general AI and everything. It's like, I don't know if you know anything about this. Like, why do I care about Elon Musk's opinion about cryptocurrency? I don't think I do.
Yeah.
But yeah, some of these people start to step into every realm, and suddenly they become these what are they called? There's a word for somebody that is like not mathematics. There's a word for somebody that knows like every single topic or whatever.
Yeah,
They seem to become these types of people, but they don't know everything about every topic. But then people start to worship everything they say. Oh, a polymath.
Yeah, polymath. Yeah. Well, this is for me. The other side is, I always know, when I'm doing my thing and say in my classroom, right, in this space, I know there's somebody watching, or eventually is going to be watching, who is an expert on whatever it is I'm talking about. And it keeps me very careful. Like, keeps me humble, keeps me careful. It's like, okay, I'm not going to be an idiot here. But it also makes me a lot smarter, because then I know the places where I need to ask a question as opposed to giving an answer. And my most common answer to any question is like, well, I'm not really sure, but I kind of have thought about that. But you know, maybe it's also if
so
someone was
fucking
paying me
dumb,
as
dude.
much
How
money
is she
as
able to
people
do
are
that with
paying
no
these guys,
mana?
maybe I would just come up with answers.
Explain me
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
How
yeah,
can somebody just
Yeah,
randomly
that's
spam
another-
shit and
that's
have
another issue
ignites?
too, and I notice this in my world, I have to be a bit more combative, right? Because I'm trying to win an opinion over, and you're not paying to take a class with me. You're like looking at me as a competitor to the other people in the world that I inhabit. So there's this interesting middle ground I have to inhabit where I'm usually willing to concede. Like,
It's
I
just so
don't know
fucking
about this
annoying,
particular
bro.
thing. I
She's
just-
literally
I
like,
don't have the
she
background
has
for it.
no out.
But,
She has
it's an
zero
interesting
out. She has
dynamic
no
where
flash.
I go to
She has
argue
a
with somebody,
TP.
and they'll never make that
And my
concession.
fucking jungler
and
does
by
not
me
want to fucking
taking
say
more
hi to
intellectual
her
on
at
information,
all.
I can have the appearance of being weaker sometimes. There are times where, and I employed this strategy for a little bit, but then I stopped because I don't want to get caught doing this because it hurts my credibility. But like, I noticed that like if I prepare really well for a debate, a lot of people don't know this, but there aren't like millions of high quality studies out there. If you're debating almost any topic, there's going to be like a few pieces of key literature that people are talking about for almost any big topic. There's going to be like 2 or 3 studies you really need to know. So if I'm like really well versed on a particular topic, I'll know what the big studies are and I'll be able to talk about that. And it is crazy to me how many people will just cite a study to me in a debate and have the total opposite conclusion. And as soon as I push them on it, I'll be like,
Yeah.
I don't think that that's right. They'll be like, oh, okay. And then they'll just move on. And it's like, wait, you don't even know what you're
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I have to be
Well-
careful because if somebody brings something up where they're like, well, actually, it's actually been demonstrated through like a macro
look,
recon thing that
that's
you know,
a jungler.
with Rankers, this happened.
She's ahead,
Oh,
and
shoot.
he's
If I-
actually
if I-
ganking.
If I take the cautious position, and go, I don't actually know if that's true or not.
bro, this is
I
a
look
good
weak.
time. Good
because the other
game.
person is willing to assert
is a
that they know
solid
and they don't.
game.
And that's a really weird
Yeah.
dynamic to have play out
No
in
worries, bro, you're
conversations.
good.
You know, yeah.
Yeah,
She's literally
I-
just having
I
a fucking
actually-
butt chomp
I
over here with
experienced that in the opposite way, although I never really ask people, but I always, when I concede or I say, you know, I haven't really thought about that, or I think what you're saying is actually not true. I don't know why that is. I have to go study it, but my gut tells me that that's actually not the place. I actually feel like it puts me in a better footing because I'm willing
Yeah,
to say, all right,
that's
I
fine.
don't
That's
wanna
that's
know. I'm willing
that's
to
a
change
team
my mind or
player.
think about it
Smug.
deeply,
Number
but I
1 NA.
certainly understand it. This stuff
He
is
hears a
really
guy
complicated.
say, "Hey, this guy has
There's
no
nothing more
flash,"
complicated, by
and
the
you're
way,
like,
than
"Hey,
the
that
kinds of
seems
things that I talk
seems
about
kind of
today. Just
like an easy
human
money,
beings.
if you
I mean,
ask
oh
me.
my God.
I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
But you know, the other
And
side that I get is
No,
I do a
I've
lot
been
of things
this
that-
fiddle. I've just been fucking yelling
because
at
we
fiddle.
have these videos. I do a lot of things that that you can't see
No, you're
everything
fine.
that's
It wasn't
behind
you.
it,
It
so you
was
don't really know.
literally
what's
me just
going
fucking
on,
yelling at my
what's happening.
fucking
You know,
jungler
so
being
for
like,
example,
"Yo."
a number
Yeah,
of
because he
years
can't
ago,
move at all.
uh,
Yeah.
there was I had a student in class
But
who
even then, I was like,
stuttered,
when me and
and
her
it
were
was
even, and I
really
was
serious
dueling her
stuff.
in the fucking
and by the
lane,
way,
it was
now,
like
right
I just
now,
couldn't.
there's probably
I could get her to
some
2 HP,
way-
but she would always
Stutter
just run
is
away,
what
and
it
I'd have to
was
either
called when I was
overcommit or
as far
something. So I'm
back as
like,
I
bro,
can
it's just,
remember. But
she's
now,
literally just so free.
I haven't learned what would be the more appropriate. A speech
Nah, I'm
impediment
pushing now.
is fine.
Doing the
but
duelist
the
shit.
speech impediment is
I got my
actually a stutter.
main,
There's
my
probably a
mythic. I
word
got
for
my.
it
Better word
that
for
usually
almost
I would
Tiamat.
learn.
Sure.
Yeah, I would learn.
No, I
that,
had
but
Tiamat
I haven't
too.
learned
Fuck
it.
yeah.
So someone would
It's
call me
game.
out. It's like, you know,
GG's.
That's, not cool. You should
That's
do
what we're
this.
talking about right there.
But in
That's
any
all I
case,
needed.
He
I'm unlocked. Okay.
he's-
My true
he's-
form is
And
unleashed.
so he started talking, and I
And you're out here
and
just
I gave him the
fucking
microphone
munching
in the
away,
room, right? So it was a
killing
big, huge room. It was
things.
800
This
people in
Vagar
there,
is
and
getting
I'd say,
shut
like,
down. Look at
"Oh,
that
okay,
4
hang on a
CS
second."
difference. Get
And
fucked.
he couldn't get the words out, and I turned my mic
Get
off,
fucked, you
and I
shit
said,
face.
Hey, but he raised his hand to answer the question.
Mhm.
So, so first off, I'm like, he's.
I was
raising
never
his
this
hand.
toxic on.
He
Wow.
knows he's gonna have a hard time.
I was a better
getting his
person.
comment out.
I was a better
The
person.
rest
I
is-
became.
used to be the faculty
It is-
advisor
it is
for
fun to be
the
toxic.
Disabled Student Association at Rutgers University, so I'm really comfortable in this whole world of whatever disabilities are.
Mhm.
So I'm just so the first thing was I just sat and waited
Yeah,
for
that's
him to
fine.
get it out. Meanwhile, I know the whole class.
She's coming to say hi to
is
me, and
just
I'll
getting
beat her
really
in every duel.
nervous because they're nervous for him.
Just
I'm like,
like, all I
"Why
have
are
to
you
do is
nervous
be
for him?
smart
He's
about it."
not nervous. Like he took the microphone and he's asking a question. Right? Took him about a minute. When he got done, I turned my mic off and I said, "Hey, you want to come down front?
You can lock into the whole chat.
Come
It's
down
kind of
and
stupid.
Sit on the table in front."
Mhm.
He's like, "Yeah, okay." So I said, "Hey, come on." So we went down front, right? Now, mind you,
Yeah, she has no fucking.
no one knows that I
tentacles.
asked him to come down if he wanted to come down front.
There's one
People
tentacle.
had the idea that I told him to come down front. Now he's front and center on the table. The whole
Chain
class is
spot.
watching him.
Mhm.
And so the first thing I say is like, "Hey, is it easier to sit here? The whole class is watching you, or was it easier to be at your seat? And he's like, oh, it's the same. I said, okay, well, good. So you got this experience here now. I said, listen, I got all day. Class is
Me?
out
No.
at X time. We got all day.
Oh.
So I have a few questions for you.
Oh, yeah,
You-
jeez.
Can you answer
I'm
them?
down to dive.
Yeah, I can answer them.
Oh,
Okay,
no, man,
so anyway,
you're right.
we had
Good
a
call. Good
great
call. Good
experience.
call.
He ends up
See?
working for us.
I'm blind.
as
That's
a-
why I have
as a
glasses.
facilitator,
Okay. I
right?
need
It's
you
just
for
like,
those
dude,
things.
You're amazing, very insightful, right? With the whole thing, right? By the end of his college career, he had worked through so much of what his
Yeah, dude. I'm
anxiety
washed,
was.
as they
his
say.
speech pattern was so much more
Washed as
fluid.
fuck.
But I got critiqued on that.
The real
because
question is,
people didn't
can I
see
get?
what actually happened?
Can I get
which was
Vagar's
me
ult
saying,
on my
like, hey, I'm gonna
W?
give this
That'd
guy
be
the power
based
to do what he
Giga
wants to do.
and
And so
chat as fuck.
I think a lot of times things happen in that way, that we critique people without knowing what the full story is.
Sure, it definitely can
uh,
happen. Yeah.
Uh,
Something. So something in regards to that, and I guess maybe 'cause this is
Oh,
in your wheelhouse,
Fiddles.
I'm kinda
Obama.
curious
Fiddles,
about.
he's unlocked.
is,
He's unleashed. He sees the positivity.
So I did.
Yeah,
I
but I'm
did
pushing
music
top.
in college, and I started music a little bit late. I started my freshman year of high
Oh, she's
school.
bought. She's about to get.
A lot of people seem
I'm
to
about to
start in
get this
grade school.
tower.
I started my freshman year of
Highest
high
of
school.
low keys.
I did something called beginner band. So it was like me and 3 other kids, like people that usually would just take band because they just wanted to pass an elective in high school
Oh,
or
she
whatever.
TP'd me.
For my freshman year. And I remember, but I really liked music. When I started doing it, I was
I'm
like, oh my
trying
God,
to
this
take
is
that
awesome. I
red.
wish I would've started
It's
this
still
earlier.
there.
And I think I wanted
It
to
is
join
still
my
there,
jazz
baby.
ensemble, the school jazz band. I wanted to join them on my second
Yep, you
semester
can block
of
her.
my high
Oh,
school
yeah.
year.
She has no idea.
Which is not typically allowed because usually if you're in a beginner band student, you're not going to be able to play with a jazz group or whatever. And I remember that I asked the teacher, Mr. Johnson, best teacher I've ever had. I asked him if I could join, and he said, if you join, it's going to be difficult. If you really want to, blah blah blah. I
Everything's
had
fine.
so much respect
See?
for this man. He was
Calculate.
very good at like treating you
Ooh,
a
I
certain
get
way.
you.
Like he had very high
Trade?
expectations of you.
Oh, we're good.
And
Back out.
you never
Nope.
cared about
Bad.
like, the grade or any of
I have
that.
no mana for a dash.
You always wanted to live up to his expectations of you. And I remember that I
Okay.
had one moment where I think it was either my first or second rehearsal with the actual jazz band. And I made some mistakes. The literature was probably a little bit too hard for me, and I made some mistakes. And I remember that he walked up. It was really early in the rehearsal. He's like, "Hey, like," he said something to the effect of like, maybe you're not ready for this yet, or you need to figure this out
Easy.
because you're not playing this well.
That's the way I
And,
like you.
I'd never
stupid.
practiced so hard in my life for like that week because I never wanted to hear that.
That's the way I like you. Okay, I like
And
you.
something
Stupid
that
as
I get,
fuck.
and I understand maybe not everybody
That's
learns
what we
this way,
want.
not everybody likes that kind of like motivation. For me, it felt big. I read a book a long time ago. I always recommend this book. It's such an amazing book. It's that Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yeah,
And it's that idea that people live up
bold.
to their expectations.
I might have gone too much.
Something
for
that I
CK,
get
to
a
be
little
real.
worried about
But we'll find
sometimes.
out.
We talk a lot about on the left. So the right likes to focus on
Oh, no,
individuals,
Kais is here. How
and
the
the
fuck
left
did Kais get
likes
here?
to focus on overlaying structures of society.
mhm.
And I get worried sometimes we talk about the structures
Oh,
so
Jesus.
much that you end up disempowering people on the left because if you can make
Yeah.
an excuse for your failure, it's very easy to always fall back on that excuse.
Mhm.
Yeah, how do you balance it? Or do you ever get worried that like for certain types of minority students, for women, for black people, that it becomes very easy to say like, oh, I didn't get this because the guy was
Oh,
racist, or I
okay.
didn't get this
I guess
because
I'll
somebody
take.
was sexist or whatever, that they start appealing to those broader injustices and it somehow like inhibits or hampers personal growth. Do you ever think about things like this, or how do you balance this?
Okay, I
Yeah,
just need to
think about
start
it all the
actually
time, and I
playing the
think
map a
that,
bit better.
Human beings have.
I'm not doing
I mean,
bad
we're-
with
we're
it, but
most of us are in the
I'm-
middle.
I'm
in terms
on
of
the same
degree
side,
to
and
which
I'm
we
not-
blame
I think
ourselves for
we
the
don't-
problems that
we shouldn't be
befall us
playing.
versus
I should be playing a
other
split
people.
if I got
when
TP
I
and
look
Alawi's
around
got flash.
classes,
She's got
it's
like
me that I
she has to
didn't see,
pick.
or was the test unfair, or whatever.
because if she's in a team
and
fight, she's way
I
worse
think it's
off
the-
with no
it's the kind of
flash.
thing where
She
you-
just get
you-
caught like hard
It's
by
okay
you.
sometimes to.
But if she's
to
like with
try to
me, she'll
identify
have to
the
she'll just have to
places
get out.
in a larger structure, the larger system that are really
I should probably
unjust
push
and
Bob.
unfair.
You guys are lean bot.
But always with a certain
Drags
kind
in
of
a minute,
focus
I'll
on
probably push top
ourselves,
then.
right? Like we always have to look at the places
Mhm.
where we. Well,
I got the
what I
sustain for a
find is,
lifetime now.
pretty much
Got my
doesn't matter
Hydra.
across the board, whether it's rich students or poor students or white students or black students or brown students or gay or straight or whatever it is, right?
Mhm.
I don't find much of a difference.
Okay, that's not good.
between the
That's not
people.
what we
And
needed.
I'm just
Oh,
talking about
maybe.
students,
Maybe it's
but
what we
I
needed.
also look at people.
You're
right?
up. You're still up.
Obviously, I have a
You
very,
2v2.
very
2v2.
complex and diverse friend and colleague network.
You got the
all
HP
over
for it.
I think
Oh,
I
not
don't see
anymore.
much
Jesus.
of a difference between people in the degree to
Yeah.
which they don't take responsibility for themselves.
Gotcha. So you think it's all more or less the same, yeah?
I wasn't sure how. She
Yeah,
played, though.
I really do. Now, I think that we create these ideologies, right? These arguments that make it seem as though we're not forcing people to take responsibility. But the truth is, people are taking responsibility. Look, the most conservative hour of the week, or 2 or 3 hours actually, the most conservative, hands down, is in a black church on a Sunday morning.
Sure.
You know, you will never get a more conservative argument there. It's like everything that happens to you is your fault. Fix yourself. Pull yourself up. Stop blaming other people. I mean, the message is just unbelievably conservative. Far more conservative than you're going to get at one of these big white megachurches. Like, who's that? The guy and the pretty boy down in Dallas or
I'll say
Houston or
with
wherever,
Vagar, I'm
the
just
white guy.
definitely not the best.
The guys that are
looking
doing
fight.
the prosperity gospel stuff.
Yeah, who's the
Well,
guy?
I
What's
think
his
I
name? The
solo
guy with
anybody
the-
on their team right now,
I mean, there's
including
some
Alawi.
names, but, you know.
Alawi has
And
that
Joel
early
Osteen
push,
is
but
one
I
of them. That was the guy
definitely have to
Joel
sustain
Osteen.
that.
that people were
Joel,
mad
Peter
that he
out.
wasn't letting people stand during a.
And I have the
yeah. I mean,
dueling
you know,
to fucking actually take her down.
The average black church is has a far more conservative message than Joel. It's just like, okay, whatever. But yeah, anyway, that would be my take on that. And again, I'm someone who's on the ground, right? And the problem is,
I'm coming
not
over.
the problem, but like I'm in the middle of it every single day. You know what I mean? So I often, I just have ideas that it's not as bad. It's not nearly as bad as a lot of folks. You know, like somebody like, well, Ben Shapiro's like office hero, but a lot of these folks, it's not nearly what people characterize it to be.
Gotcha. Yeah, I hope it's not as bad as it characterized it to be like in schools. I know that for some of the media stuff, it gets very frustrating because you'll so like a really common example is recently there was a case of like I can't remember. There was a black guy that got out of a car who was shooting at cops, and as the cops go to get him, they end up shooting him because they think he's reaching for a
I'll be
gun.
playing League
And
all day
people
because
will
I hate
compare
my
that
life.
to,
It's gonna be
the
lit.
shooter in
Actually sounds
I
hella
think it
dang.
was
But you're in
Buffalo, or
Texas,
might
so
have been another
not.
mass shooting,
That's
but-
Tex-Mex,
Yeah.
okay? That's
where
dog
this kid,
shit.
the cops
That's
found him,
dog
and
shit,
he
okay?
was
This
suspect,
Cali
and he got out of
shit
the car, he
is
was saying,
actual
"No."
Mexican
And
food,
people
okay?
immediately are going to like, look, they're treating him differently because he's white. and
No.
that guy differently because he's black.
No, actually you don't. That's why it's called
probably had
Tex-Mex,
to do with the fact that
okay?
they were shooting at the cops, and the second kid just like got out and got on his knees. I don't think
Well,
it's like a race thing, but
That's
yeah.
exactly why it's called
But listen,
Tex-Mex.
but you know, in terms
No,
of the one,
no,
for-
they're
for the-
different.
This is
You have the redneck ones,
the young
okay?
man in-
We have
in-
the progressive ones. We have the progressive liberal ones,
and
okay?
this one who they shot like 60 times or something. Well, the initial
You have the
thing was they were
Alamo
shooting at the
ones,
police,
okay?
right?
We
And
don't.
I said, oh my God.
That's not
all right,
us.
well, here it is. And then I
It's not me.
listen further, right? Because I know if I'm going to talk about this stuff, I got to make sure I get a certain number of facts. Then I listen further, and I work with police, right? So I know, like,
I have a
okay,
TP, just don't get caught.
I know that police policies are way more complex, the things that they do, than people imagine from the outside. The procedures and so on. Well, and then it turns out that's like, well, yeah, he shot, and they found a bullet casing in his car. He didn't have a gun on him, but they found a gun in his car, and then they found a bullet casing in his car, but they didn't know if it was from his gun. I'm like, well, hang on a second. You said he was shooting at the police, so either it was from his gun or it wasn't from his gun, and now you're not really sure. But it made it sound, the initial report made it sound like, you know, he's like shooting at the police from his
as they're
car.
like
And I'm
driving and everything. Yeah, my understanding is I
As
think it
they're
was
driving.
yeah, one shot was fired, and cops called it, and then when he got out of the car, people said it looked like he was going for his belt, and then everybody started shooting. Yeah, but yeah.
Well, he was running away, and so then it becomes like, but in any case, it's God, when you talk to police, man, it's unbelievable. I talk to police, and it's like, okay, what about this case? And what about this case? And what about this case? And a very thoughtful police officer, right? Like, by the way, police are. There's no one worse for police than bad police officers.
Yeah, of course.
It makes
I get
everybody's
250
life
of it because
hell.
Twitch takes half.
And they hate it, right? And so
Yeah. Unless you're a partner, then they
bring these
renegotiate
cases,
your deal.
and
But
they say, well, okay, but here you got to think about this over here, and you got to think about this. And
yeah, I
suddenly
mean,
it's
there's
like everything else
a lot of
in
people.
life.
But I mean, in reality, I think
Oh, damn, I
YouTube does
haven't
better,
thought
but
about that.
it's just a
Okay.
lesser
Right.
market.
And so, you know, it's you got 60 million.
Yeah, that's why. It's,
You
just,
know,
it's
every
a hard
year you get
outreach to
about
actually
60
get to.
million police civilian encounters in
Interactions,
the
yeah.
United States. Not that many go bad.
Yeah, that's
But
a
those
really
that do are problematic.
yeah. Do you know who Scott Alexander is? Guy he writes
think I do.
he writes a blog, the Slate Star Codex.
Oh.
But he's got a very interesting essay about
Nice.
how bad we are as humans with grappling with
how
data.
did Kane get away?
And he
Yeah,
goes
that's
on
alright,
to
we got
write that,
Tower.
like, you know, and this is a good point, right? Like, people will say, I get frustrated because progressives seem to understand this on one end, but they want another. People will say, like, you know, oh, black crime is horrible, and it's like,
Oh,
okay,
you're
well,
trying
how
to
much
get
crime
dragged.
should there be? And it's like none.
You guys are kinda low
one
HP, but
murder is too
you
much,
might-
and it's like, okay, well,
Yeah.
that's unrealistic, right? There's
Oh,
always
yeah,
going to be
that's
some
why
level of crime in
they're either
society.
gonna do Dragon.
But then we'll turn around
They're
and
trying
we'll
to
do
do
it
Dragon,
to
actually,
police officers too, right?
unironically.
Like, if I could show you, like, this is a challenging question, you know, to ask your progressive. If I could show you one
Yeah, see, my
bad
girlfriend
cop
in my
killing
chat
every single week,
absolutely agrees
is
with
that
me.
a
Text
bad
messages,
thing?
text
And,
messages,
like,
actual dog shit.
to even answer that
Literal
question
dog
honestly,
food.
well, you kind of have to understand, well, how many cops are there? What if I tell you there are 50,000 cops and there's one cop shooting every week?
I don't
Do
know
you
if
think
my
that's a bad
computer's
thing?
froze that or
50,000
not,
cops-
but
okay, yeah, that's a really bad thing. Sure, that's pretty bad. But then what if I tell you, well, there's not 50,000, there's 500,000? Does in your mind,
she's
does that
definitely in
bad
my
thing
YouTube
become
chat,
okay now
'cause I
because now I have
multi-stream.
10x the number of cops? No, people don't think that way, right? They think about
Well,
these one
it
discrete
says it in the
events.
Twitch
If I could
chat
show you
because
one
it says from
brutal bad
YouTube,
cop
and I have
killing
my
every
restream
month,
shit tell me.
it would be over. We'd be
shit.
back to writing. But is that even really
Yeah.
that
Well,
bad of a thing?
you're-
There are over
it's probably 'cause you're in
500,000 police officers
Texas.
the United States. We would expect to see some level of misconduct, right? Like, what is the expectation?
Lo-
of placing
literal dog
cops
shit.
Or any other member of society to not act in a negligent. or
It's the
criminal or
same
bad
type
way?
of
There's
Mexican
gonna
food
always
you
be
get
some
in
level
Wisconsin, okay?
of
It's
crime
like
or
dog
misconduct,
shit,
yeah.
dog
Well,
shit.
Okay, so there are actually about 900,000 police. And
No, it's not the
there's about
same.
1,000
You know why?
people that are
Because
killed by
which,
the police
like,
every
at what
year.
point in Mexico do they cross over? Central or
And on
West?
average,
West
about
Coast is
50
best
of them
coast.
are
I have
on
never
average.
heard in my life Central
And
Coast is best
so,
coast
okay,
because there's no
so that's
Central.
about
Okay,
60
Central's dog
million
shit. It's literally
police
called the
human
fucking
interactions. And I
airplane
don't mean
states for a reason.
interaction where
They only go coast to
when
coast.
I was doing a ride-along,
They only go
we were
coast to
riding along and
coast.
somebody
Okay,
raised to the-
they only go coast to
the
coast.
Cops and
That's
things like
fine.
that.
I
That's
don't
not
want
an
Elon,
interaction.
okay?
Interactions
I want
are
his money.
amazing.
I don't want him.
Yeah.
And I understand. If I had
So you think
his
about
business, I
60
would probably
million,
take it to Texas
you think,
too.
okay, 1,000.
That
Think
doesn't mean
about
he
we have
left there
about
for fucking
400
Mexican food.
400 million guns in this country.
It doesn't mean he left there for
We have
Mexican food,
1,000
bro.
people
Like,
were
yeah.
killed, about 50 of them on
As-
it's okay.
And you know this
Really,
reference
it's
because
probably-
you were
I
there.
might expect
As
those
Who Is
numbers
This
to be a
said,
lot
you're
higher.
dizzy.
Yeah.
Okay? You're just fucking dizzy.
And mind you, police should be held accountable for it, right? But
A lot of people don't know
Man.
who this is.
okay, and I get that. And is there racism? Look, I've been studying racism in the criminal justice system for my whole.
I mean, you say
career.
that.
So like, I know the data. I'm very good at it. I can talk about it. I
Well,
taught racism.
that's
in
because
African American.
we don't
Studies
deal with
department
poor. I'm
for
sorry.
12 or 13 years. I'm really good.
We
I
don't
can
speak
lay it
poor
out
on the
very
West Coast,
carefully
okay?
and very thoughtfully.
I'm
And-
moving
and
out
yet,
because I hate this fucking
what you're
joint.
saying about the data,
But I
hang
will
on, let's sit back and
undeniably
look at the
always
numbers
say,
and let's
even
look
because
at
I'm going to go to
this,
Washington,
right? What
even
would we
when I go to,
expect and what do we
I'm going to
see?
move to
And, like,
Washington with my girlfriend, yeah.
yeah,
When I
it's-
move to Washington,
well, it's pretty-
no, it's not.
pretty
But it's
well-trained,
way cheaper than
you know?
here.
For the most part,
Like,
things go quite
I'm not going to
well.
be paying
Human
$7 a
beings are-
gas,
we're
a gallon over
actually
here.
really good. We're good.
I
we're
would
good
say
with each
that,
other,
yeah,
we're
100%. But
thoughtful,
California's
we're
not known for their
kind, we're
barbecue.
careful.
California's
You know?
known for the Mexican
When's
food.
the last time I saw even two people getting into an argument with each other
No.
anywhere?
No, we're
right?
known
I
for
mean,
our
it's been-
food.
except my wife and I. But other than
No,
that,
it's
been,
not.
like a long
It's
time.
known for its Mexican soup, Mexican food because
Life
there's
is
literally
really
only
not
one
that
mediocre
dangerous,
thing that they
really.
can
Some
ever
places
flex
it
on.
is, right?
Other than your
So,
big
the
belt
crime rate,
buckles,
you take,
that's
like,
the second
Newark,
thing that comes in line,
Delaware,
okay? Everyone's
right?
like, oh,
High-
everything's big in
very high
Texas.
crime
And then
rate.
they're
At
like,
some point,
let me flex my
30 years ago,
Tex-Mex because
murder
it's like
count
the
over
best
world.
cuisine that we'll
But
ever
what you don't
have.
hear is that,
Like,
look,
that's your
90%
quote
of
unquote
those
signature
murders happen
dish.
in a 6-block radius
Mhm.
in Newark, Delaware.
Tex-Mex.
Yeah.
So
But it's like
let's-
dog shit.
Let's be really
Actual
clear
dog
about
shit.
what we're talking about here. So
Yeah, or people that have
this-
never
this-
been to like Chicago
You're-
or anything will think that like
No, it's
every
not.
single street on
It's
Chicago is,
absolutely
like,
not.
bathed in blood. And it's like,
You don't
no,
even know what a
there's only,
California
like,
burrito
very-
is,
and
okay?
there's some very nice
You're
parts of
an
Chicago,
uncultured
but not every
swine,
part
is what we call you in my
embroiled
area.
in drug
the
violence
vast
or, you know,
majority of the vast majority of Chicago is quite. Look,
Okay, that's fine. And then you get
I
food.
was in Chicago. One of our former students teaches there, and so we visited him
I'll
in
be
a
right back,
school
babe. I'm
that
gonna get
is
some food.
right in the heart of everywhere you don't want to be, right?
Mhm.
Such that wow, just letting kids out of school was just an an amazing experience to watch how this all unfolded, right?
Mhm.
And And we got in his car and we drove back to where we were staying. And we're saying, okay, so he's like, yeah, so I go down this street. This street's fine, right? We go up here 2 streets. Now we're gonna go down this street over here, and it's just like one of these things. Thinking, oh man, okay, this is really complex. But the news on Chicago is like, hey, we had 13 killings this past weekend in Chicago. All right, it's a different story. So it's like this is the stuff we have to, working on all the time.
Yeah. The lack of engagement with numbers is like really frustrating to me. I deal with this a lot because I see a lot of like anti-vax stuff, and there will be people talking about how like there are all these horrible side effects of the vaccines and blah blah blah. And it's like, man, at this point, billions of people have taken these shots. If there were these like hugely negative side effects, we'd be hearing, you'd have way more than like the 2 stories that everybody's talking about on Facebook. We would be seeing not hundreds and not thousands, not tens of, probably hundreds of thousands or millions of these cases popping up. It wouldn't just be like the 2 chief examples that everybody throws around. Like, and the idea that you could hide like that much, vaccine side effects, like there's just no way. Like you wouldn't have to convince anybody of anything. We'd all see it constantly. But everybody.
It's the games, right? My wife she studied human development for her PhD, but essentially she has a PhD in statistics, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so a few years ago, we were reading through a couple of drugs that were suggested for her mother who had cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And like she really dug into them to say, all right, hang on now. So this drug, it's efficacy on this issue, right? So they're recommending this drug. So she started looking at the studies and like, oh my God. If you understood statistics, you'd have to start from scratch. You'd have to read these studies, and you get to the end of the study and you think, well, there were of 1,000 people. If she takes this drug, if she's one of 1,000 people that takes this drug, 5 of those 1,000 people might prolong their life for an additional 6 months, kind of thing, right? It's like, but that was enough to pass through, right? To validate that drug, right? Oh my God, right? So this kind of stuff, like the more you know, the more you have to know in order to be able to say anything meaningful about pretty much anything that's going on day by day. Yeah. And if we really followed somebody around who knows about whatever the issue is, and we understand the level of ignorance that all of us are walking around with, we wouldn't offer an opinion about pretty much anything.
Yeah,
which is troubling for me as a teacher.
Yeah, I definitely feel the same way. I've learned so many random stats things because every time like the new conspiracy comes out for vaccine related stuff, it's like, people come out like, did you know that if you look at, people are using they're using relative risk ratios instead of absolute risk ratios, and this is and it's like, oh well, what does this mean? And then you read about it, and it's like, okay, well, you would never use this to measure the efficacy of a drug. This is stupid. But like, you have to. It sucks because every new theory that comes out, you have to go and read. It's like, well, now I need to learn this thing, and now I got to learn this thing. But people will hop for as soon as you disprove one thing, they'll hop to the next thing, and it's just like, the vaccine stuff was one of my favorite medical related things ever was in Florida. I think DeSantis passed something to kick trans people off of Medicaid. And part of the bottom part of his statement was, we don't believe in some of these trans studies because we haven't seen any good prospective randomized controlled trials showing the efficacy of, gender affirming care. And I'm like, wow, prospective randomized controlled trials. You guys didn't care at all about that when you were talking about ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine or any of the number of anti-SARS-CoV-2 drugs. Like, why? But now you guys seem to have a really good understanding of what good studies and science are. What happened? And it's so frustrating. Oh my God. Yeah. Jeez.
Well, this is all we can do, and I guess I would say this to your listeners, is just recognize that, if you really don't want to be dumb, recognize all the places in which your own ideology is going to seep into arguments, like kind of accepting something that someone says just because it fits with the narrative that you have of the world. And this is why it's so important to be reading things or listening to things and perspectives.
I'm gonna go.
What it is that you imagine to be.
I'm gonna go get In and Out.
It's painful to me, actually. Sometimes I feel embarrassed. I'm in my class. I'm talking about things.
Because I won't be
There's
here.
5 cameras